Are you being verbally abused? There's a subtle form of verbal abuse you may not be aware of, and I want to bring this to your attention. We'll call this the rule of 3 or more. Whenever someone offers you criticism, but they're giving you 3 or more points of criticism, it could be verbal abuse. Whereas if someone just offers you 1 or 2 things, they're giving you perhaps constructive criticism, something you can actually work on. Of course, it doesn't always pan out to the numbers, but I want you to be aware of the numbers so that you can be aware of if you're actually subtly being verbally abused, because they don't have to yell. They don't have to raise their voice or seem like they're being mean. They can just be speaking in the same tone I'm speaking now. But by hitting you with another criticism and another criticism, multiple back-to-back criticisms, it could actually be a form of verbal abuse. So I'd like to give you an example of that and how that looks. So imagine if someone says to you, "Hey, Johnny, can you please put the toilet seat down after you're done using it? It drives me crazy for it to be left up." That could be constructive criticism because of the way the person directly told you what they needed and left it at just one thing. It gives you something you can actually work on. Whereas if someone hits you with 3 or more criticisms, it's really not too constructive because you can't work on them all. It would sound something like this. You always leave the toilet seat up. You always leave the cap off the toothpaste. You never let me know where you're going when you leave the house. I'm sick and tired of having to clean up after you in the kitchen. There are so many issues that you've created with our finances that literally both you and I will have to be working for the next several years. I can't even go out in public with you because of the weird autistic way that you act. So this is limiting my life. It's making me feel like I can't even have friends anymore. And what's really ridiculous is that every single time I try to give you something or do something for you, you don't appreciate it. And the other year, from like 2 years ago, I caught you cheating. And 3 years ago, you weren't cheating per se, but you weren't telling me the truth about things. You were lying to me. Now, as I'm going through the list, you're listening and kind of feeling like, hey, maybe I'm just getting tea on somebody. Maybe this is all really valid. But what I just did there was a subtle form of verbal abuse. It might seem like just valid complaints, but it is not actually healthy for you to receive multiple criticisms, even if they are framed as valid complaints, even if the complaints actually were valid. Even if I had been actually guilty of all of those things to a degree, it would still be verbal abuse. Here's why. Number one, the brain can only handle so much negativity or criticism. The healthy ratio is 4-1. So there needs to be 4 positive thoughts or interactions for every 1 negative or critical. That's in order for the brain to be healthy. That's in order for the relationship to be healthy. That is science. Okay, so when you give someone more than a 4-1 ratio of criticism, you're actually tearing them down. Also, notice the tone. In the second example where I'm going on and on, I wasn't really trying to kindly help the person. There was a lack of kindness there. Notice the extreme language. You always, you never. See, I didn't have to raise my voice, but I was actually verbally abusing the person because the tone and the language that I was using was not helpful or constructive to them. It was actually meant to temper them down. By using these extreme words, there wasn't any room for acknowledging what they do well, or that they are, although being imperfect, may not be the worst possible version. Saying that they always do this or they never do that is an exaggeration. In almost all cases, it's an exaggeration to say always or never when you're talking to a person. And so this is good for us too to be careful of, because we may be verbally abusive thinking that, hey, this is just how you win an argument, or how you vent your feelings. I'm just venting my feelings. Well, no, don't do that. Don't vent your feelings at someone by tearing them down with multiple criticisms. If you really have something that somebody needs to change, then you give them one or two things. And you also should not tolerate verbal abuse. So if there's anyone in your life who comes at you with one thing after another thing after another thing, or a lot of times this will be an answer to a question. So you will have asked them, hey, what's wrong? Are you okay? And they take that as their opportunity to be like, well, you never this, you always this, I'm totally blah, 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 and you did, and you did, and you did, and you're sitting there listening because you're thinking this is legitimate, but how could you possibly remember 5 to 7 to 10 things? How could you remember all those things to fix? And then we're just going in the past sometimes about things you can't fix. So think about it. It's not actually constructive. So then what would be the only benefit? The only benefit is to tamper you down, is to break your spirit. And that is verbal abuse. Verbal abuse is very serious. It tears us down emotionally. It tears us down mentally. And then that can have a toll on our physical health. We don't feel happy in our relationships. So don't accept abuse and don't be an abuser. If you're in a situation where someone starts doing that, in the moment, you should stop them when they get past number 2 and they go into number 3 and number 4. As soon as you realize that they're past 2 things, you go, whoa, hold on. I can't remember all of these things. You're giving me too many things. Give me 1 or 2 things that I can work on. I can't work on 6 to 7 things at once. This might immediately expose the motive of the person who's talking to you. Because if they're not willing to back it down and give you 1 to 2 things, or they take that as another excuse to abuse you, it's time for you to seriously examine the relationship. Because they might just be a toxic person that you need to cut out of your life. Hope this helps.